The Untold Story of Black Jesus and His Impact on History. The untold story of Black Jesus is a profound intersection of faith, history, and racial identity that compels us to confront long-held assumptions. As we stand at this crossroads, we must recognize how deeply the image of Jesus has been shaped by the forces of colonization and religious conformity. The idea of a Black Jesus challenges not only the portrayal of Christ, but also the historical narrative that has often erased or marginalized African contributions to Christianity. Where's this journey through? The Untold Story of Black Jesus invites us to reconsider the impact of race on our understanding of faith and culture. It's a story that reveals how power and prejudice have shaped religious perceptions and how recovering the true cultural and historical context of Jesus offers a new vision of inclusivity, justice, and spiritual truth. The African heritage of Jesus, often overlooked, reminds us that faith has always been deeply interconnected with cultural diversity, and that this forgotten narrative has the potential to reshape our understanding of both history and our modern spiritual lives. As we embark on this exploration, we invite you to keep an open heart and mind. This journey of rediscovery is filled with moments of historical erasure and recovery, pain and hope, and ultimately the pursuit of truth. Join the conversation and help reclaim this powerful narrative. Now, if you've been moved by this exploration, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this important dialogue together, shedding light on untold stories that have the power to transform how we see both history and faith. 1. Early Christian history, the African heritage of Jesus. The historical narrative surrounding early Christianity and its African heritage reveals much more than a shift in religious thought. It is a story that challenges the long-standing Eurocentric lens through which Christianity has often been viewed. The portrayal of Jesus as a white figure is a reflection not of historical truth, but of centuries of cultural and racial bias. In reality, Jesus' heritage, his cultural environment, and the theological movements of early Christianity are deeply interwoven with Africa's intellectual and spiritual traditions. In the traditional image of Jesus that has dominated Western art and theology, fair-skinned, light-haired, and European-looking, is a product of Eurocentric interpretation. This image has been perpetuated for centuries, reinforcing a racial narrative that aligned divinity with whiteness, while marginalizing the profound influence that Africa has had on early Christianity. However, historical and geographical evidence suggests that Jesus, a man born in Bethlehem and raised in a region at the crossroads of Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, likely had a physical appearance more reflective of the indigenous people of these areas. His skin was likely darker, and his features would have resembled those of Middle Eastern or North African people, rather than the European figures seen in classical Christian art. The Bible does not provide a detailed physical description of Jesus, which has led to a range of interpretations over time. However, many biblical scholars assert that, given the historical and geographical context of Jesus' life, it is likely he had features similar to those of the local Jewish and African populations of his time. The Gospels record his journey into Egypt as an infant, where his family sought refuge from Herod's massacre. This critical episode is symbolic, showing Africa as a place of sanctuary for the Holy Family and further embedding Jesus in the African narrative. Egypt, a cradle of African civilization, plays a crucial role throughout the Bible. From Abraham's sojourn to Moses leading the Israelites out of bondage. Beyond the geographical and symbolic connections, Africa's influence on Christianity goes deeper, particularly through the intellectual contributions of early African theologians. In the early centuries of Christianity, North Africa became a significant center of Christian thought and theological development. Cities such as Alexandria and Carthage were intellectual hubs, producing some of the most influential Christian thinkers in history. Figures like St. Augustine of Hippo, Tertullian, and Origen were African theologians whose work shaped the very foundations of Christian theology, contributing to doctrines that continue to shape Christian beliefs to this day. St. Augustine, a Berber from North Africa, is perhaps the most well-known African theologian. His writings on grace, original sin, and salvation formed the bedrock of Western Christian thought. Tertullian, another African, was the first to articulate the concept of the Trinity. God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a doctrine central to Christian belief. Origen, based in Alexandria, contributed immensely to biblical exegesis and the development of early Christian theology. Yet, despite these contributions, the African roots of these theologians have often been diminished or ignored in favor of a more Eurocentric narrative of Christian history. Given the marginalization of Africa's role in the development of early Christianity is not a mere oversight. It is a distortion that has obscured the true diversity of Christian thought. The erasure of African figures from mainstream Christian history has profound consequences, both socially and spiritually. For centuries, people of African descent have been excluded from the dominant narrative of Christianity, their contributions overlooked, and their presence in the early church erased. This distortion has served to support colonial ideologies, reinforcing a theological framework in which whiteness is associated with divinity and blackness with inferiority. The portrayal of a black Jesus and the acknowledgement of Africa's role in early Christianity are not merely matters of historical accuracy. They are acts of spiritual and psychological reclamation, offering people of African descent a fuller understanding of their place in the Christian story. By reclaiming this heritage, Black Christians can see themselves reflected in the sacred narratives that have shaped their faith for centuries. Furthermore, this reclamation challenges all Christians to embrace the diversity of the faith's origins and to recognize that Christianity is not the exclusive domain of any one race or culture. It is the African heritage of Jesus. And early Christianity is not just about geographical proximity or intellectual influence. It is about the deeply interconnected nature of the ancient world. The early church was a multicultural, multi-ethnic movement, with Africa at its heart. The erasure of Africa's role in Christian history has had lasting effects, reinforcing racial and cultural divisions within the faith. By restoring the truth about Africa's contribution to Christianity, we begin to heal the wounds caused by centuries of exclusion and misrepresentation. The idea of a Black Jesus is not just historically plausible, it is spiritually empowering. It offers a powerful counter-narrative to the Eurocentric images that have dominated Christian thought for centuries. Recognizing the African heritage of Jesus is not only about correcting historical inaccuracies, but also about affirming the dignity and humanity of people of African descent. It enriches the Christian tradition by highlighting the diversity and complexity that have always been part of its story. In reclaiming the African roots of early Christianity, we begin to see a more complete and honest picture of the faith's origins. The narrative of a Black Jesus, nurtured and protected in Africa, speaks to the deep and lasting connections between Christianity and the African continent. This is a story that has been hidden for too long, but its restoration is essential for a fuller understanding of Christian history. As we uncover these truths, we are called to reflect on the ways in which our understanding of faith has been shaped by racial and cultural biases. The reclamation of this heritage is not only a matter of historical accuracy, it is a step toward spiritual healing and empowerment. 2. The spread of Christianity, African cultures shaping the faith. The influence of African cultures on the early spread and development of Christianity is a profound and often overlooked chapter in the faith's long history. Many modern understandings of Christianity are tied to its spread through the Roman Empire in Europe. But this narrative fails to account for the significant role Africa played in shaping early Christian thought, theology, and practice. Before Rome embraced Christianity, African cultures were already contributing to the faith in ways that continue to impact the global Christian community today. Ethiopia, in particular, stands out as one of the earliest nations to embrace Christianity long before it became the official religion of Rome. Ethiopian Christianity is rooted in ancient traditions, with some accounts tracing the country's Christian heritage back to the 1st century, specifically through the encounter between Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch as recorded in the Book of Acts. By the 4th century, under King Ezana, Ethiopia had adopted Christianity as its state religion, making it one of the oldest Christian civilizations in the world. What sets Ethiopian Christianity apart is its preservation of ancient practices and texts that were either lost or altered in other parts of the world. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, known as Tewahedo, has maintained a biblical canon that includes the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, texts excluded from the Roman Catholic and Protestant Bibles. These works offer unique insights into early Christian beliefs and serve as a window into a version of Christianity deeply intertwined with African cultural and spiritual heritage. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church also developed rich liturgical practices and religious iconography that reflect the unique blend of African and Christian influences. Its ancient music, monastic traditions, and religious art are not only expressions of Christian devotion, but also symbols of Ethiopia's enduring spiritual and cultural identity. Throughout its history, Ethiopia has resisted numerous external pressures, from foreign invasions to colonialism, preserving its unique Christian heritage and ensuring that the faith remained an integral part of the African continent's identity. Through an addition to Ethiopia, Christianity spread to other African regions, including the Nubian kingdoms along the Nile River in present-day Sudan. By the 4th century, the Kingdom of Nobatia had embraced Christianity, and Nubian Christian communities flourished for several centuries. Nubia developed its own unique Christian traditions, blending African culture with Christian theology. This synthesis gave rise to a vibrant Christian culture that included magnificent churches, monastic communities, and religious art that incorporated both African and Christian symbols. For nearly a millennium, Nubian Christianity thrived, maintaining close ties with Christian communities in Egypt and the broader Mediterranean world. The cultural and religious legacy of Nubian Christianity is a powerful testament to Africa's central role in shaping the Christian faith. However, by the 14th century, the spread of Islam and internal conflicts led to the decline of Nubian Christian kingdoms. Despite these challenges, Nubian Christianity left a lasting impact on the development of Christian traditions in Africa. The erasure of Africa's role in Christian history is a reflection of the painful legacy of European colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. As European powers expanded into Africa, they brought with them their own version of Christianity, one deeply influenced by European values, cultural norms, and racial ideologies. This European version of Christianity was often used as a tool of colonization, reinforcing the belief that European civilization and culture were superior. African spiritual traditions, including Christian practices, were suppressed or co-opted to serve colonial interests. In the depiction of Jesus, as a white European figure became central to this colonial project. By presenting Jesus as a symbol of European superiority, colonizers sought to reinforce their dominance over African people. The image of Black Jesus, deeply connected to Africa's spiritual heritage, was erased, replaced with a version of Christianity that aligned with colonial ideologies. This distortion of the Christian faith served to justify the exploitation of African people and resources, further entrenching racial hierarchies that placed whiteness at the top and blackness at the bottom. Yet even in the face of colonization and slavery, African Christians did not passively accept this imposed version of Christianity. Across Africa and the African diaspora, there were acts of resistance as African Christians sought to preserve their faith and cultural traditions. In the Americas, enslaved Africans incorporated elements of their Christian beliefs into their spiritual practices, creating new forms of worship that reflected their African heritage. These acts of spiritual resilience were a rejection of colonial Christianity and a reaffirmation of Africa's deep connection to the Christian faith. In the legacy of Black Jesus, and Africa's contribution to Christianity remains a vital part of the story of the faith. The resilience of African Christians in the face of colonization and slavery is a testament to the enduring power of African spirituality. Despite centuries of efforts to erase Africa's role in Christianity, African Christians have continued to shape the faith in profound ways. From the early Christian communities of Ethiopia and Nubia to the theologians who laid the foundations of Christian doctrine, Africa's role in Christian history is undeniable. As more people seek to uncover the hidden histories of Christianity, the figure of Black Jesus stands as a symbol of hope and empowerment. The restoration of Africa's place in Christian history is not just about correcting historical inaccuracies. It is about reclaiming a spiritual heritage that has been buried under centuries of colonization and cultural erasure. For African Christians and all who seek a deeper understanding of their faith, this journey of rediscovery is an essential step toward healing the wounds of the past. Reclaiming the African heritage of Christianity offers a more complete and truthful understanding of the faith. The contributions of African cultures to the spread and development of Christianity are not mere footnotes, but central to the faith's history. By honoring the figure of Black Jesus and the legacy of African Christians, we take a step toward healing the divisions that have been perpetuated by centuries of Eurocentric theology. This reclamation of history is not only about restoring dignity and identity to African Christians, it enriches the entire Christian tradition, reminding us that the faith is rooted in a multicultural and multi-ethnic world, with Africa playing a vital and enduring role. Third, impact on modern Christianity, the relevance of this untold story. In the context of modern Christianity, the story of Black Jesus is more than a historical revelation. It is a deeply philosophical and transformative narrative that addresses the profound issues of race, identity, and spiritual justice in the 21st century, at a time when society is confronting the painful legacies of racism and inequality. The untold story of Black Jesus emerges as a crucial element of truth and reclamation. For many Black Christians, this story represents a long-awaited correction to centuries of misrepresentation, offering an opportunity for spiritual empowerment and healing from the distortions of the past. The dominant image of Jesus as a white European figure has, for generations, perpetuated a sense of exclusion for Black Christians. It has symbolized the dissonance between the liberating teachings of Christ and the ways in which Christianity has been co-opted to uphold systems of racial oppression. The whitewashed image of Jesus served as a tool to reinforce colonialism, the transatlantic slave trade, and the belief that African people were spiritually and racially inferior. In this way, Christianity, a faith that should unite and uplift, was manipulated to justify oppression, creating a spiritual disconnection. For those whom it sought to subjugate, the recovery of the story of Black Jesus, however, is not merely about setting the historical record straight. It is a philosophical and spiritual reclamation. A return to the truth that Jesus' teachings are universal, transcending race and culture, yet deeply connected to the experiences of those who have been marginalized. By acknowledging the African heritage of Jesus, we recognize that the faith from its very inception belonged not to any one race or culture, but to a richly diverse and multi-ethnic world. This understanding dismantles the notion of a racially exclusive Christianity and invites all believers to reflect on the inclusive and transformative nature of the faith, so in reclaiming the image of a Black Jesus, Black Christians are given the profound opportunity to see themselves reflected in the divine. This act of reclamation challenges the historical erasure of their spiritual heritage and affirms that their faith is not a colonial imposition, but an organic expression of their ancestral beliefs and cultural identity. It allows for a reconnection to a faith that has, for too long, been manipulated to serve the interests of power and control. Rather than its true purpose of liberation and spiritual growth, this growing movement to rediscover and celebrate the African roots of Christianity is gaining momentum in churches across Africa and the African diaspora. Black Christians are reintegrating African spiritual traditions into their worship, re-examining the contributions of African theologians, and reclaiming the image of a Black Jesus as a symbol of resilience and spiritual empowerment. This movement reflects a deep philosophical inquiry into the nature of religious identity, exploring how faith can be reclaimed, not as a foreign imposition, but as an authentic expression of the African soul. For Black Christians, this journey of rediscovery is not simply an academic exercise. It is a path of empowerment and healing. In a world that has long devalued Black lives, The image of a black Jesus represents a powerful counter-narrative. It challenges centuries of racial injustice and affirms the sacred dignity of African people, reminding them that they, too, are made in the image of God. This recovered image is not just a theological correction. It is a reclamation of spiritual autonomy, a rejection of the narratives that sought to dehumanize and marginalize them. The philosophical implications of this rediscovery extend beyond personal empowerment to the broader Christian tradition. By restoring Africa's central role in the history of Christianity, we confront the deep cultural and theological distortions that have shaped the Western understanding of the faith. Scholars are re-examining the contributions of African theologians like St. Augustine, Tertullian, and Origen, figures whose intellectual legacy has often been overshadowed by a Eurocentric narrative. This scholarly revival is part of a larger movement to recognize that African Christians were not passive recipients of the faith, but active participants in shaping its doctrines and practices. Of course, this movement has not been without resistance. There are those who view the acknowledgement of Jesus' African heritage as divisive, fearing that it risks fracturing the faith along racial lines. Yet this perspective fails to grasp the deeper philosophical truth that the story of Black Jesus is not about creating division, but about restoring balance. Recognizing the African roots of Jesus does not diminish his message of universality, it enhances it, reminding us that Christ came to uplift the oppressed and to challenge the power structures that seek to dehumanize. The resistance to the narrative of a Black Jesus is not truly about his skin color, but about what that color represents. It symbolizes a challenge to the systems of privilege and power that have long dominated the interpretation of Christianity. The image of Black Jesus calls into question the ways in which the faith has been used to uphold racial and colonial hierarchies. It demands a reckoning with the uncomfortable truth that Christianity has often been wielded as a tool of oppression rather than as the radical force for liberation that Jesus intended it to be. For Black Christians, the recovery of Black Jesus is both a joyful and painful process. It is joyful because it affirms their rightful place within the Christian tradition, reclaiming a heritage that was stolen and buried. It is painful because it forces a confrontation with the centuries of erasure, exploitation, and dehumanization that accompanied the distortion of their faith. This journey of rediscovery is therefore both a healing process and a call to action, a reminder that there is still much work to be done in dismantling the legacies of racism and colonialism within the Church. Ultimately, the story of Black Jesus is a story of liberation, a philosophical and spiritual affirmation that Jesus' message transcends all barriers of race, class, and culture. His teachings were revolutionary in their call for justice, equality, and love, and his life was a testament to the power of standing with the oppressed. The recovery of Black Jesus in the modern world is a continuation of this revolutionary message. It challenges us to look beyond the surface and to embrace the deeper truths of Christianity. Truths that call us to dismantle the structures of injustice and to build a faith that is truly inclusive. But in recovering the image of Black Jesus, we are not merely engaging in historical revisionism. We are engaging in a profound philosophical inquiry into the nature of faith itself. What does it mean to follow a Savior who stands with the marginalized? How do we reconcile the teachings of love and justice with the ways in which Christianity has been used to oppress? The story of Black Jesus forces us to confront these questions and to commit ourselves to a faith that reflects the true essence of Christ's message. The image of Black Jesus is a powerful symbol of hope, resilience, and spiritual reclamation. It is a reminder that their faith has deep roots in the history of Christianity, that their voices matter, and that their experiences are essential to the global Christian tradition. As we continue to uncover and share this untold story, we take a step toward a more inclusive and just understanding of Christianity, a faith that belongs to all people, and a Savior who reflects the diversity of the world he came to redeem. 4. The need to recover and integrate the story. The untold story of Black Jesus compels all Christians, regardless of their background, to reflect on how history, power, and prejudice have shaped our understanding of faith. This narrative urges us to explore the richness and diversity within the Christian tradition, expanding our vision of Jesus beyond the confines of race and culture. More than just a correction of historical inaccuracies, the recovery of Black Jesus calls for the restoration of a faith that stands firmly on justice, equality, and love. For centuries, the image of Jesus has been manipulated by those in power to justify systems of control and oppression. The task before us now is not only to set the record straight, but to change it. But to reclaim a faith that transcends division and exclusion, aligning itself with the radical and inclusive message that Jesus proclaimed. Moving forward, this story must be shared far and wide. It is vital that churches, schools, and communities make space for the voices of African theologians, pastors, and laypeople to be heard. Through these conversations, we foster hope in creating a more inclusive, just, and authentic expression of faith. The story of Black Jesus is one of resilience, recovery, and justice, an untold story that has the potential to reshape our understanding of the past and inspire a more just vision for the future.